Thank you for joining us today. I am Carolyn Hymas, Associate Director of Alumnus and Family Engagement at CalArts. I am thrilled to introduce Charmaine Jefferson, an esteemed CalArts trustee. She's joining us today to lead the talk before the art installation and the curtain goes up. Career Options, Understanding the Work and Building Team Collaborators. Charmaine, thank you so much for joining us today. I quickly want to go over the format of our talk. After introductions, which we've just completed, we will watch a short clip from the film Babes in Arms, and then Charmaine will share her presentation, and there will be time for Q&A after the clip. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll jump into the snippet of the film we're going to see.
We're with you.
Sure we are.
Everything will be all right.
Forget it.
I guess I shouldn't have shot my mouth off the way I did.
It's all right. They understand.
Oh, I hope so. I wouldn't want to hurt Dad for all the show business in the world.
Oh, forget it.
Certainly our time will come.
You better Listen, you kids. I think our time has come.
What do you mean?
All right, I'll tell you. We might as well face it. Our folks are up against it, and up against it good. I've been doing a little snooping around. You know what I found out?
What?
There's a frame up in this town to get the actors and their kids out of it. Our houses are mortgaged unless the payments are up to date by July 1st. Why, out we go.
Yeah, I know something else, too. Miss Steele, the head of the Welfare Society here, is trying to get a petition with enough names on it to send us all to a state work school.
Work school?
What, are you kidding?
Can I go too, Ricky?
Oh, quiet, will you, Bob?
She thinks we ought to be learning a trade or something instead of what we pick up in the theater. She's dead against show business.
That'd just be our chance to stick us away while the folks are on the road, wouldn't it? No, but we can't go on the road. No, we're too young. We're excess baggage. Listen, are you kids willing to stick together and pull yourselves out of a hole?
You bet.
I've got an idea. Our folks think we're babes in arms, huh? Well, we'll show them whether we're babes in arms or not. I'm going to write a show for us and put it on right here in Seaport. Why, it'll be the most up-to-date thing these hicks around here have ever seen. Opening night, we'll have Max Gordon, Sam Harris, Lee Schubert down to give us the once-over. How about it, kids? We'll get every kid in this town on our side, and we'll start right now. What do you say? Right? Come on, kids, let's go!
One, good afternoon, and I'm so glad you're all here with us and able to be with us. And I can't see everyone's faces, but I see a whole lot of names. So at some point, I'm going to look at people and go, unless you're on a cell phone, show yourself. If I can put my wrinkles on this screen, you can be on this screen. I showed that little, I wanted them to show that little clip, and we probably could show it again before it sinks in, but you can pull it up on the internet at any point. Just put in Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. And I am in the business of working on, my consulting business works with nonprofits all around the country. And they range from performing artists in dance and in music and in theater to museums and historic houses. It's work that engages me in everything from cultural competency workshops with a practical application, not a whole lot of theory conversation, which would probably make me barf, and conversations around how to connect the dots between art and history and culture for practical use, both in terms of education and on stages and in productions and in performances, etc. And I deliberately asked them not to spend a whole lot of time giving a bio background on me, because I'm going to try and talk through this with what I'm going to call connecting the dots. And part of the reason for looking at that little segment of Babes in Arms is that I'm going to ask you to put up a finger and tell me, how many people does it take to screw in a light bulb? I see one. I see one. I see, I like it. Someone said two. Another one said two. Oh, 10. I love 10. So what you just saw in that little clip, I call it the Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney, let's put on a show. I use it, I don't show the clip, but I say, make that statement all the time to people. Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland decide to put on a show. Everybody's involved, everybody's excited, and it's a hit. Okay, we're gonna sew the curtains and I'm gonna sing the song. And while I'm singing the song, I'm gonna take the tickets and I'm gonna clean the stage and I'm gonna make the sets, and the whole town is involved. In order to put on that show, it took more than one person. In reality, it takes more than one person to screw in a light bulb. Now, let me give you a perfect example of how that works. And I'm not going to do any of my background in order. I'm going to give it to you in bits and pieces because it'll help you to think about how it applies to the work that you want to do. I started off as a dancer, and I trained in dance, and I danced professionally for 8 or 9 years. I'll come back to some of that later. Fast forward into parts of my career, and one of them was director of show development for Disney Entertainment Productions. A place that I would have said I never, ever would want to be when I was training to be a dancer. Now, things are a little bit different for your generation than they were for mine. And I'm not so old that that sounds terrible, but it's true. And no one in their right mind who wanted to be a dancer would do anything that was commercial and be considered a serious artist. And that was me. I was only going to do concert work. I was only going to be involved with the legitimate stage and theater. I didn't want to teach. I might want to choreograph, but I danced. That's what I wanted to do. And that was my dream. And I didn't have a whole lot of others that I wanted to do. And so therefore I was very fortunate to have done it for 8 or 9 years. I want you to fast forward to me being director of show development at Disney Entertainment Productions, where the choreographers, the musicians, the writers, the set designers, all of those people reported to me as we developed and put together Disney's California Adventure, the Disneyland Resort, the hotel, that whole new complex that's in Anaheim at this point. And I remember thinking to myself as I took that job, I wonder what my friends in the arts are going to think. That I either sold out or I'm going to bring art into Disneyland. Not that there wasn't art there, but that I was going to bring our world into another world. We needed to infiltrate. And that's exactly what I came in there and did. And I got hired because of the range of the experience that I'd had before that. And went into that job meeting 13 executives. Everybody but Eisner at the time. 13 executives, from the resort to the entertainment company to the animation company, etc. when I got hired through a search firm. In that process, 2 things happened. And I'm gonna, while I'm talking to you, I want you to understand that I'm deliberately weaving things in about what are your obstacles and how do you deal with them and what are your opportunities. And I went into that position, 1 being brought in by a headhunting firm, 2 because they were actually at Disneyland at the time in the resort trying to expand the ways they looked at artistry, but they really weren't sure what they wanted to do. And they were also looking to shake it up. They're always looking to shake it up. It's kind of like the Egyptians, you know, if the pharaoh died, all of the maids went into the tombs with the pharaoh when they died, even though they weren't dead. Everybody went and you changed shifts. So they were in one of those changing shifts. And I went in and 2 things happened as I was going in there. This just struck me. 1, being interviewed and being asked by what was then the vice president of that eventually became one of the presidents of the park, where on earth did we find you? If you're somebody that looks like me, you actually know what that means. I knew it was meant as a compliment, but what it really meant was, especially with all the things that had kind of preceded it, there must not be any other colored people like you out there. The choice I get to make at that moment when I'm trying to make a decision is a choice that says what was in my head, which was out there in the field plantation with all the other talented Negroes, or thank you. And I give that example because as artists, we tend to want to be right there with what we think, put it out there, push back against either an establishment or an approach or whatever. And yet I knew that what was being said, and I realized this is before everybody's spending all their time going diversity, equity, etc. I mean, which is the same thing as the civil rights movement, but that before that, right? So I understood that it was what it was intended to be, because I also got asked questions like, well, could you possibly really understand the background of Snow White and Alice in Wonderland and etc. And I got asked that question twice in my job frame. Once when I was going into the job, and once when they were changing vice presidents and the vice president wanted to bring in their own team. And so they were trying to figure out how to assume that I didn't know. When I got asked the question the first time, you know, so how well are you engaged in the Disney lore? I explained it. After I'd been there for 3 years and someone new comes in and they ask the question, I learned to sit there, hear it, because they wanted to take and move me into a role that was no longer overseeing the creative, but rather overseeing the business side, contracts, certain negotiations, administrative matters, all of which I also had control over. I called it the creative resources, and then bring the content people in from somewhere else, none of whom were actually going to look like me or have had the range of my background. And when I got asked that question by the new person coming in, well, you're probably not as steeped. I went into the training that as an artist, I knew I had. And I made a choice different than the choice that I made when I was interviewed and asked, where did you come from? And I'm saying this because choice and how you use it going along is real important. I had to make a choice that said at that moment, I got to give him an answer that puts this on the right track. Because I already know that probably down the road, they're going to shift everybody out. But I need to put it on the right track. And while we sat in my, I don't know, 10 by 10 office as a director, which made me an executive in the company, I looked at him and I went into theatrical mode. And I began to explain that I had a blue and white record player when I was a little girl. And it sat in the middle of my turquoise room. And I would take out my album and put it on the record player. It was a gray and white album cover. They had albums in those days. And pull it out and put it on the record player and put the needle down. And it would go, I'm wishing. And I would sing the song. And I knew every word of the Snow White album as a little girl. Cinderella album, the Mickey Mouse Club. And the assumption that he had made about me was that somehow or another, I assume, because I did not look like him or everybody else, that somehow or another, I couldn't possibly be steeped in the Disney lore, despite having already produced probably 50 shows for the resort that covered everything from their newest characters to the other. And I said to him, almost with a tear, false tear coming out of my eye, but I meant it. I wanted to be Snow White and Cinderella. I just didn't know I couldn't be Snow White and Cinderella. and that there were hundreds of people out there just like me who wanted to be that. And I immediately offered him a compromise. So I'll tell you what, I'll keep being director of creative development, and I will handle the creative resources division. Put them both under my wing. I took no more money, no more nothing else. And I tell that story because it meant, therefore, two things. One, I was always going to be steeped in the backside of the business and on the front side of the business, which was the content side. And the reason it was important was because when I got hired and went to go take the picture with all of the 125 executives at the Disneyland Resort, I realized when I walked into the Lincoln Theater where we were going to take the picture, that I was the only person of color connected to the content. The only one. And of the few others that remained, that were there, they were either finance or something operations. I chose at that moment to pick and choose how I needed to answer that question so I could get my point across, knowing it was risky. The first time, I'm not taking that risk. And I'm saying that because I'm giving that as an example because it's big enough to realize that no matter how far you go in your career or where you're going with it, every step of the way, every experience you have, both who you are, where you come from, how you got there, is going to be a part of your life going forward. How you collaborate, how you meet people, what you do with them. Let me play a little bit more out in that scheme of that particular Disney arrangement. By the time I got to Disney, I had not only already danced professionally for 8 years, but then gone into arts administration at the National Endowment for the Arts. And I did it in the dance program. And I got that gig because when I made the decision that I might stop dancing, and it wasn't absolutely my intention, I mean, it was something I cried about. I didn't know how to dance halfway. Either I'm dancing or I'm not dancing. I was not one of those people who love being in class just for the sake of being in class or any of those kinds of things. So when I made that decision, I applied for an internship at the National Endowment for the Arts. And it just so happened there was a job opening. And it just so happened that the person who was running the dance program at the Arts Endowment at the time under Livingston Biddle was Rhoda Grauer, who used to be the manager of Twyla Tharp and had also been a manager over at ABT. And she wanted someone in the role who came from the field. It was a purely administrative job. I got lucky and got offered both positions, but they came out of two different departments. I decided to take the job. In taking the job, I was at NYU getting my master's in dance education. Again, I want you to hear a choice. Mine was in dance education, not in the fine arts program. Not because I thought that it was better, but because at that time, I would have gotten far more attention or opportunity to figure out how to make a living while I was dancing that might be connected to dance either at a college, etc., if I had my degree in dance education versus dance in the fine arts department. Dance is dance. We had to dance, but that choice put me in a position that when time came that I made that decision, again, walking you backwards, I couldn't get the Arts Endowment job unless I had my degree in my master's. I still had 2 more semesters to go. And in order to get that job, I needed to get out of there. I had to walk into the chairwoman and say to her, I need to get my degree now, and I need to go so I can get this job. This opportunity is not going to come again like this. And she said, well, but you've got 2 more semesters. And so, you know, this semester and the next semester before you get your degree. I said, well, then we've got to double me up. Came right at the right time. It was sort of summer when I got the opportunity to hear about what was going to happen the next year. And she said, well, you wouldn't be able to handle it if we double you up. I said, let's do it. Go for it. And we doubled my class load. And when they turned to me and said, well, you have to take kinesiology, I said, no, I don't. I took kinesiology at UCLA. That was an undergrad course. What else you got? And we kept going. And I took a double load. And I got my master's in dance education in 3 semesters. And without it, I would not have been able to get the job at the National Endowment for the Arts. They would not recognize dance or choreography as a skill set for an administrative job. Now I imagine it would probably be a little bit different. But the reality meant that they didn't understand what you as an artist do to make your work happen. And part of what you want to do as I talk today about connecting the dots is think about the way in which your work is not just the artistic product you create, but the process you use to create it, all the tools you need to have it happen, all of the settings that you need to have happen, and what you need to understand about that entire picture. So when the question gets asked, how many people does it take to screw in a light bulb? And you get an answer that says 2 or 10 or something like that. Your first answer is 1. It's kind of like what you would say to some kids if they're all standing around while Johnny screws the light bulb in instead of doing what they're supposed to do. But in reality, to run a theme park, you need 1 person to operate the roller coaster, but you need 10 people to know how to do it. You may need only 1 ballerina to dance Swan Lake, but you need at least 2 people who know the role. You may need only 1 cameraman, but you might need a backup camera. And so contingency in the arts is no different than contingency in any other business. It's that the other businesses don't usually understand how our business of the arts work. And in the days when I was going to school where someone would have thought, you can't possibly be serious about your craft if you're focusing on all these other things, all those other things paid off to every job I have been able to have since then, or have fed into it one way or the other, including how you collaborate, how you make friends, who you do what with. So go back to Disney for 1 second. While I was at the Disneyland Resort, going to bring in art. I'm dedicated. I'm going to bring in art. I'm not telling everybody that's what I'm going to do. I'm just thinking in my mind, we've got to bring some artists in here. People who call themselves artists, not the commercial ones, and they're artists too, but you know, those starving artists, all the ones who are with Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, let's put on a show. And to do that, I needed to look at the circumstances of what was going on there. What did they need? What were the lands that they created? Where would they need shows? Where didn't they need shows? How had they thought about it? This is what they thought they needed. This is what we're going to tell them they needed. One such approach was just to look at the fact that they opened up a brand new theme park that didn't have all the amenities that they thought were going to be ready. And God forbid, so now you got a bunch of people standing in line a long time, which means they're not having a good experience. It's kind of like thinking about your theater. If the people can't get into the theater to see your show, if they can't get their tickets taken, if they can't get their cars parked, if they can't get in there, they walk in with a bad experience, You could be acting your tail off. It may not make a difference because they've already not been set for what you're trying to do. So every aspect of what you are doing is part of the issue of collaborating and figuring out what needs to be done, which is why you want to be as briefed as possible on all of those approaches. I mean, it's nice to just be the artist, but that's usually in the movies somewhere. Wasn't in Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland's movie, but it is in Lorna Desmond's movie until she's not relevant anymore. And in that process, we came up with a concept called Art Ventures. And the notion was that there would be art created in all of the lands that sort of told the story of the land, and that we could hire artists to do, real artists. Now, that isn't to say everybody isn't a real artist. It was the distinction between we pay minimum wage and anybody can do it. No, anybody can't do it. And I'll give you an example. In the land that was the farmland, I'm not sure if that's what they call it now, but we decided that we would make it so that people could make corn husk dolls. And that those corn husk dolls, and some of you may have made some in an elementary school class, could be as artistic as possible or as simple as possible, and that it would be free. So after I got everybody peeled off the floor because they were having a panic attack because we were about to offer something that was going to be free, the point was, because while Dad and Junior get on the roller coaster, Sissy and Mom don't like roller coasters or she's too short. Meanwhile, the line is long. So 45 minutes of their day is going to be taken up just for this one ride. Let's create something that is artistic. And by having a real artist, it meant that the artist could work with whoever came up according to their skill set. So I brought in people who I knew had the capacity to do this because I had done that, seen them do these things in other instances. And they in turn were able to work with the audiences. And one of the very highest ratings that they got was around two things: that particular concept of Art Ventures. In the soaring land, we did things with windmills and airplanes and make a different kind of airplane and etc. and make it look artistic. We took a wet backboard and cut it into shapes and let people draw on it like sidewalk art and cut it, but it was cut in pieces like it was a serpent so that they could walk away with the square that they had drawn on. And the point was to give this sense of an artistic experience to a California adventure, give the people there something that they would have an experience with, bring real artists in. The fight came when, after it was successful, and this is great, and we want to keep it, and it's gone on, and it's now been a year, we need to figure out how to cut costs. Couldn't we just train somebody instead of paying them $25 an hour? Couldn't we just pay somebody, whatever it was, something like $11 or $10 an hour, and teach them how to make, two corn husk dolls, and that's it? And I said, yeah, you could. But as soon as you stop making it feel like it's a personalized experience is the minute that you start to defeat your purpose in having it. But that meant I brought artists that I met and knew along with me into the Disneyland Resort. One of them was your alumni, Jacques Heim. So when we created Lights, Camera, Chaos, it was a stage show. You see stage shows at Disney all the time. The intent was that it was an artistic stage show or an artistic stunt show because it was in Hollywood land. And I went to Jacques and said, this is what I want to do. You think you can come up with something? Nobody that I knew had the skill to create something as artistic as he could that looked like it was also could appear to be a stunt show if it needed to be, and have it be an artistic production that had to run maybe 5 times a day, 6 or 7 days a week. And he and the dancers, we brought them in, they created something, we created props of them, doors that swung and flipped over, and all kinds of things that were consistent with the kind of things that they work with. And when Disney's California Adventure opened up, the element that got the highest review was Lights, Camera, Chaos, created by Jacques Heim, a CalArtsian, with music by Nathan Wang. You never know where your connections are going to come from. And Jacques and I had interfaced previously. I'm trying to remember where it was, but I just knew he was the right one. And the other right person I knew to bring into the mix was when we decided we were going to tap dance on drums. And I got a tap dancer that I knew about, and we went over to Remo Belli, the drum maker, and they made drums for us, precisely that we could tap dance. And then physics and science came together, and I realized that no matter how hard we tried, we weren't going to be able to tap dance on these drums and get the right sound with tap shoes. And we put on tennis shoes, and it worked. And it was a combination of both street and other movement, but it was that idea of doing something out on the street and on all kinds of different sizes of drums, not too far away from things you saw the Nicholas brothers do in an old movie. And it worked to make Disney's California Adventure feel different than Disneyland. And again, collaboration, creating opportunities. Now, it does not, to be clear, it didn't hurt that I started off with, I don't know, a $25 million budget, right? But in my mind, I was like, really? I'm used to producing a whole full-fledged season at Lincoln Center that's going to cost $2 million. I didn't say that out loud. I said, we'll try to make it work. And when they came back and said, well, you know, we have, everybody's got to cut budgets, and we're cutting all the budgets, so now, you know, it can only be $16 million. I fainted, I cried, I wept. We produced the shows. There were several others that we produced, including an entire, and then a whole stage show that was produced that was in the theater. But I could not have produced those shows without having worked for Dance Theater of Harlem and the master of making something out of nothing, Arthur Mitchell, and having built a building for Dance Theater of Harlem, having been in the position of being Deputy and Acting Commissioner of Cultural Affairs, which then opened my eyes to engaging in museums, science centers, botanical gardens, zoos, as well as the performing arts and more of the visual arts. I have visual artists in my family, so I get it, but I can't paint. But on the other side, as a business operation, all those skills came into Disney. Dance Theater of Harlem came into Disney. How did I end up at Dance Theater of Harlem? Because I was working at the National Endowment for the Arts, overseeing all the grants to dance companies and some of the presenters. Dance Theater of Harlem, amongst many others, were in there. People that I met over the years that I never met in person. We didn't have phones with pictures on them in those days. And sometimes if you're working nationally, these people would never be seen. I might not ever see them. And as I worked with all of them and they got to know me over the years, two things happened. I, one, became the director, the site visit coordinator for the program, the dance program. And that meant sending out evaluators to see the work that was being done for people who were applying. Well, I created a system that said, no, that's not good enough. We need an intent to apply. Because by the time someone applies, we don't have time to see them and the season may already be gone, and we created an intent to apply card. And if you could then have your work seen and maybe you make a decision not to apply. And oh, wait a minute. Rhoda Grauer wanted to expand the way the dance company was looking at art. And I wanted to see that happen too. And so that meant we needed to expand the number of people, not only the number of site visit evaluators we had, but the skill set and the range and the discipline of what they had the ability to do. It took more than one person to do a site visit. And in so doing, it meant that the National Endowment for the Arts would not just fund Swan Lake. Love Swan Lake, but it meant that it also wasn't going to only just fund what may be the latest avant-garde dance movement. It meant that it could also start to pick up and view as a dance form rather than only viewing it as a folk art, some of the cultural genres and some of the other kinds of styles of dance that were coming out of the field, including the structures of how those organizations operated. And we expanded it enormously, and it became one of the models for the way the Arts Endowment worked for quite some time. And even led to the ability for me to stop and write a paper to the Arts Council about broadening the aesthetics for the National Endowment for the Arts, that it was too narrow in its view and in its approach. And this came around the time after Livingston Biddle, when Ronald Reagan was elected and brought in Frank Hotzel, whose job it was to dismantle and get rid of the National Endowment for the Arts. Most of you are too young to know that, but that was the mandate. And Frank Hotzel had no experience in the arts. He was a well-versed attorney who had worked in Washington. And I was now an arts administrator at the NEA, going to law school at nighttime. 4 years, worked 60 hours a week, went to law school at night and on Saturday morning. So by the time Frank Hotzel comes in, I can actually talk to him in a language that matches the language he has versus what was going on at the time of people pushing back against, if you knew my art, you'd understand, and artists needing to learn how to speak. I give you all of that and could connect dots more and more. It is to say, there are two things I want you to put down on a piece of paper for yourself. One, more than one person has to know how to do what I'm doing in order for it to happen and to be pulled off. Two, I may or may not be the center of attention in what I'm interested in. If you were in a classroom and all the kids said they wanted to be basketball players and there were 50 kids in that class, you and I both know all of them are not going to end up being Kobe Bryant. But if they love basketball, they need to learn every other aspect so that they can stay in the thing that they love. And three, you don't know what you're going to fall in love with next. So if in fact what you have joined CalArts to do is to be a script writer because you want to write plays for Broadway, and you may be a fabulous playwright. Now you got to figure out how to be seen and have someone see your work. In order for that to happen, you need to call on every resource you've ever had. And so part of the reason for sort of telling all those dot connecting stories is to sit back and say, from the first job when I was a locker room attendant at 16 in a swimming pool at La Cienega, to working my way up to being assistant to the president in a clothing store while I was a dancer. So I had jobs to do in between dancing, and I didn't wait tables because I knew how to type. Every one of those jobs paid off into where it is I am now. And as a dancer, that kind of makes sense because you don't usually dance your entire career on stage. Singers can probably make it. Actors can change roles. But if they're not doing work in your area, that becomes an issue. So part of your collaboration with each other is you don't know who's in this scene with you right now and where they're going to be next. Broaden, you have no choice but to go outside of your comfort zone. No one could have told me to be interested in doing capital expansion projects. No one. By the time I went into doing capital expansion in New York City and building roofs for the Natural History Museum and new wings at the Met and all of that kind of stuff, by the time I had done that, my husband and I had moved into a 100-year-old house, and we were figuring out how to do Italian plastering on our own because we didn't have the resources otherwise. And it paid off. So nothing is too small. Fourth, burn no bridges if possible. Because again, you don't know. Arthur Mitchell calling me one day while I was at a law firm in Florida and saying, I want you to come be general manager of Dance Theater of Harlem was out of the clear blue sky. But it was because over the years while I was at the Arts Endowment, if they put in an application, which I did for everybody who came in, and it had problems, I helped them fix it. Because that was my job. I put as much detail into that kind of work as I did to learning a dance, practicing my technique, etc., and my craft. And the discipline of the arts that you are in is attached to everything else that you do. Last point. Really think for yourself. I wanted to do what I was passionate about. I didn't care about money, which is probably a bad idea for me right now in my life, but I didn't care about money. You guys are much more savvy about those kinds of things. So use it, but don't let it control your decision-making about your craft. If you're doing your craft because you are passionate about it, figure out not only how you're passionate about it, but how you make others passionate about what you're doing. Otherwise, go on a mountaintop and do it for yourself. Because you will have to make a living for yourself, unless, of course, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Short of that, if you need to work, find work that can add value to the overall thinking about the business that you're in, if possible, or see that work as being supportive of your ability to then practice your passion. But don't be frustrated by the two. Too often I see that what artists end up doing is being frustrated that they have to work in the grocery store and then go and starve themselves so that they can't make their work. And so, without continuing to give you more connecting dots, the other note that I had in front of me that I wanted to go was, as you're broadening your craft, broaden your world view. If today you don't think you like jazz, go sit and listen to a range of jazz artists. I just joined the board of the Fender Play Foundation. This is the Fender guitar, doing all this work with LAUSD. They brought me on because of the experience I have in nonprofits and working in management and in various other associated fields. I don't know doodly squat about playing the guitar. My husband joked to me the other day that I must be getting obsessed with Fenders, because every time I see someone play a guitar, I look to see, is it a Fender? I look to see where they're playing it. I look to see how old they are. I look to find out more information about it. And so for me, this is a new learning experience. I had no interest one way or the other. Now I'm like, I don't know whether I'm going to pick it up and learn to play it, but now I'm learning about this industry in an entirely different way. It's like finding out, no, I got to put tennis shoes on to tap dance on these drums to get the sound I want and not my tap shoes. Questions?
Charmaine, we had a couple more pre-submitted questions come in. If you don't mind if we start with those. And everyone, please raise your hand on Zoom and we'll call you out. And if you can't figure out the raise hand feature, just raise your physical hand and we'll call you in order. But the first one is, what does networking mean to you and how early do you advise students to start?
It's never too early. Go back and look at your high school yearbook and figure out who. If I'd shown you this in pictures, I'd be showing you a picture of Mark Bradford, the artwork he has installed at International Airport, standing next to Lorraine Bradley, the daughter of former Mayor Tom Bradley. On the opening, when they installed that work, and in front of that airport is the bust of Tom Bradley, the 20-year-long first and only African-American mayor of Los Angeles. No one will ever serve 20 years again. They changed the rules after that. Lorraine Bradley was my babysitter when I was a kid. Why? Because my mother was the secretary at the police department when Tom Bradley was at the police department. And I happened to be the executive consultant to the Tom and Ethel Bradley Foundation. And there we are standing next to Mark Bradford as they unveil his work. You don't know who you went to school with. My husband went to school with Eric Holder. So you do not know. There is never too early, and that includes the person who owns the grocery store at the corner, because they may be a supporter of your work. They may offer you in-kind services. They may decide to print up something, supply you with potato chips for the crew. Make friends with all of them. Let them know what you do. They may be interested in supporting your cause.
All right, so the second question that was submitted this morning is, what has been the proudest moment of your career?
I won't say proudest. I will say the two most meant the world to me. And there's a lot of them that meant the world to me, including Arthur Mitchell saying this and being able to be mentored by him and all kinds of stuff. One was the chance to say thank you to Marian Anderson when I was deputy commissioner, and the commissioner, Marian Anderson, was being honored. She was in a wheelchair by that time. Isaac Stern was her best friend. This is at Carnegie Hall. She's being honored by the National Arts Club. This commissioner wasn't going to make time to go. And so I stood in her place. And of course I had remarks on a piece of paper and I was ready to go. And I looked at her and I thought, oh my gosh. And when I was through, I walked over to her and I went down on one knee so that we would be eye to eye and she wouldn't be looking up at me, because I dared not have Marian Anderson looking up at me, and thanked her for her courage. Because of her, it gave opportunities to me. The second was when Nelson Mandela came to New York. And because of the role that I was in, if you ever watch the Ted Koppel Nightline with Nelson Mandela, which is interesting to look at these days, given the stuff that's going on, I was on the stage behind him, sitting on the stage behind him. And I met him and he shook my hand, lots of people said, and looked you in the face. And I was expecting that I would feel a sense of anger or frustration or mad or whatever. Because he hadn't been out of jail very long. So this was his first tour of the United States. And that had to be as close as I ever could have gotten to what it must feel like to touch the hand of a being who had come to grips with not only what he had been through, but how to turn it into something productive. So out of that, I suggest you will have failures. The script won't look good. The painting won't work right. It'll fall apart. The artist won't show up. What can you learn from it? I cannot say enough. I mean, yes, have your sad moment, but what can you learn from it? And how can you apply it to the next thing? And how does your thing fit into somebody else's thing? Because whatever avenue you were thinking about going, someone else could take you in another one. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I could say thank you to Marian Anderson or touch the hand of Nelson Mandela, because I was in the arts.
Thank you for that response, Charmaine. Clarissa, you have your hand up. Do you want to go to unmute yourself?
I do. Thank you. Thank you, Charmaine, for just sharing today. You are such an amazing storyteller, and I am always just appreciative of being able to virtually sit and just hear the amazing gems that you weave throughout your journey. It's so beautiful, so powerful. And I am curious about, there were a couple of moments throughout, actually all of them, that you mentioned, just like, I kept thinking like you were such a strategic thinker. And I wonder, like, when you were making these different moves throughout your career, your journey, was that intentional? Like, did you think of yourself as being like a strategic thinker in that way? Or like, when was the moment that like you started kind of connecting the dots like that for yourself? And then I'm also just curious about who were some of your mentors? So I heard you mention Arthur Mitchell, but I'm curious about just, mentors that helped you along the way.
It is very easy as your hair grays to make it sound like you have always been incredibly goddamn wise. That's not it. My mother was brilliant and she was a problem solver. And my father was a problem solver. And they taught us to solve problems. So when something goes wrong, fix it. Now, some of that comes from, particularly for people of color who sometimes are facing a whole lot of obstacles. You really do not have a whole lot of time to be standing around going, ooh, they called me a name. Get over it. Didn't mean it was right. It just meant get over it. And since I wore glasses and was 4 eyes and was skinny and had no chest, I wasn't getting ready to be a Vegas dancer. Maybe that's why God didn't give me a chest, so I wouldn't go do that. But it meant that it was always just solve the problem. Fix it. That may be why I stopped dancing early. I mean, I was 26 when I stopped. Because by this time, I'm now looking for all the other things I can figure out how to solve. I can look back and say that about myself. It's very hard to be where you are and analyze your life in all kinds of ways. But it is possible to sit back and say, whatever I'm doing right now will pay off. I used to chant a lot, Nichiren Shoshu, which believes in the notion of cause and effect, and I still believe in it. I'm just not a big ritualist in that way. And so for everything you put out there, there is something that is going to come back for you. It might not be immediate. I'm not having a God or a religious thing. It's true if you hold on to it and assume that it has become a part of your kinesthetic being. It's like understanding 1 + 1 is 2. All of us understand that now, but there was a point in our lives when we did not. If you were trying to teach somebody 1 + 1 is 2, and you told them 1 + 1 is 2, Did you learn it? You might have to do like this and like this, or like this and like this, or like this and like this, before the person who's listening to you understands 1 + 1 is 2. Because we don't all see things the same way. Take your life that way. So no, I don't think of it as I'm probably far more strategic now, but I did not think of it as strategic. I thought of it as problem solving. The second part was, I will say that it is probably my nature and personality, because I was also president of the high school and I was cheerleader and, you know, whatever else you could probably figure out how to do, pretend I could sing, that kind of stuff, would be to go in there and see the issue and figure out a solution. And so that is in my nature. And sometimes I have to control it because it means I'm trying to, people perceive it as taking over. So the other thing you want to know, because artists tend to be very, we don't sit back. We're making something, we're creating, we're either creating or we're serving the creation. And because of that frame of mind, sometimes people might take your personality to mean that you're trying to control or take over, and that's very hard. So getting through understanding who I am, as opposed to crying about it, was a life journey where I realized, and then figuring out where I do or don't need to control it. So within your own lives, as you interface and interact with other people, that moment you saw with Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, let's put on a show, was because they're going to solve the problem. They're going to save their families. They're not going to go to camp, and we're going to do it through the arts. That's Cal Arts all the way. And now it's much more Cal Arts than it was in the past, because a lot of Cal Arts in the past was, I'm an artist, and if you understood me, you'd be fine. You are not in my plane, and I don't have to explain it to you. But the students of today are as equally concerned about the world they're going to live in, how it exists, and how the arts fit into that world in a way other than just, please buy my painting for $20,000. And I think the artists who are going to make it the most are the ones who continue to find ways to connect their dots. My first mentor was my mother, still is, although she doesn't walk this planet. And every other step along the way have been the people who have been my teachers. And there've been some extraordinary ones. German, French, white, black, purple, etc., but mostly also the adventures. The ways in which your life fits into the world, and how you're not going to let the world pull you under. That's not always easy, but it is the struggle of artists. Then when you get older, you can get, strategy. You can start to say strategy because you've done something before and you saw it work. You know where it works and you know where it doesn't. So I, for example, run a great deal of my practice, my consulting practice, with people, with organizations that are outside of the city I'm living in. I strategically made that choice for 2 reasons. 1, risky, not sure it would work, but 2, so that I could still be in the city I'm in, and where I needed to, could say what I needed to say to effectuate change without running the risk of whether or not I pissed off somebody who could interfere with me getting my next piece of work. Now, I don't know how long that'll last, but that's what I've done with my practice. And so far it has paid off. That turned out to be a strategic move, but I could not have made that strategic move without having understood several things. And the key point of it was Arthur Mitchell taught me, no matter who's in the White House, Dance Theater of Harlem will be in the White House. And the first time he said that to me, I thought, well, that sounds awfully Tom-like. That means you're not getting ready to rebel rouse when you need to rebel rouse or fight against this person or that person. He said, no, I can change things, but I can't change it if I can't get in the house. And the more I listened to him, the more I understood I needed to think more like Harriet Tubman, who was the other person in my mind that is an influencer. Because without that, you don't have, she doesn't save all those people. You got to get in the house, and you got to know what you're going to do in the house. So if I would warn you against any one thing that I see as a trend right now, that for young people, and I have a 30-year-old daughter, so I'm not just saying this is a gray hair, is being in someone's face is not enough and may not even be the answer. Showing them your work is, but confrontation by itself without a purpose or a productive end is not a solution. It's why riots only end up temporary. You burn something down. Was that the solution you wanted? That's what I mean by that. Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. So in the chat, Judy Breeley shared that Stephen Levine used to say that everyone who graduated from CalArts would get an adjunct in producing.
I love it. And you want to know who brought me into this board? Was Stephen Levine. And Stephen Levine, another board member with whom I'd had experience, and I had known each other first through the National Endowment of the Arts. That's how long the connection was. And when they brought me on board, and so we want you to join the CalArts board, I said, you got it. I was running the California African American Museum. I said, you got to be kidding. I'm over here raising money for my own organization, and and it's a state museum, so you know my pockets aren't deep. You got to be kidding me, right? And literally, part of it was because they wanted to expand the way, this is before diversity, equity, blah, blah, blah. They wanted to expand the way that the boards think about the contributions that board members can make to a board of directors and what they could bring to the table. And I said, okay, if you're serious, then I understand. That's what I've got to, that's what my job is. And that is the way I have seen it, as well as other resources. But it was Stephen Levine, who I adore and still adore, along with Robbie, by the way.
That's great. Thank you, Charmaine. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. I just want to thank all of you for joining us today and listening to our talk. And Charmaine, most of all, thank you for preparing this presentation for us and for sharing your experience and your wisdom with our community. And of course, for serving on our board of trustees. We really appreciate all that you do for us at CalArts. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. And most importantly, I appreciate that CalArts gives me something fresh to see all the time, every year. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and please take care.